Hi everybody, welcome back another technical demo around the Quarkus application. This video showcases how to visualize data storage with the Quarkus Dev Services for Neo4J. Let's get started. So first of all, Neo4J is graphical database management, which allows developer to define data, but also the relationship in the nodes, which showcase a graphical way. It's called a vertical or nodes and connect to edge relationship. You can also define data itself, but also relationship between data, just like RDBMS. Neo4j provides Cipher, something like a query language such as SQL. The Cipher is to use to both querying data or creating or updating nodes relationship, just like a CRUD capability in RDBMS. Okay, let's get into the demo, how it works. First of all, we're going to create a new project using Quarkus CLI. So Quarkus create the application, and let's say the project name Neo4j the Dev Services, and then we're going to add required extension such as Neo4j and REST to Jackson to return and consume your database result. So when you create the application, just open your ID tools, and the first thing first, you're going to start the Quarkus application as dev mode. In the meantime, if you don't specify any Neo4j configuration in application property files, the Quarkus dev mode automatically stands up your Neo4j database using dev service. As you see here, is the running on container Neo4j 4.3 version, and then which definitely benefit for developer because you don't need to run like a Docker container or some other stuff like a Podman to stand up your database to connect to your Quarkus application. This is a really good benefit for developer productivity to develop data connection and data transaction application in Quarkus. All right, go back to the application, and then let's try to make sure your application properly is empty because the dev service is running based on this empty configuration. If you edited the Neo4j configuration, the Quarkus actually report that configuration rather than dev service. When you open the dev UI, and then here is a 3 default configuration for Neo4j. For example, password, username for authentication to access your Neo4j database, and the Neo4j URI for driver configuration like a boot protocol, and here is the default port to access your Neo4j using driver, which you already set it up in the dev service container. Okay, so you can change that anytime if you want, and you can specify this configuration in your application properly. We're going to do that for production environment end of this demo. Let's try to change the directory and then try to access the endpoint just to make sure the generated resources is working. So hello rest easy. So we're going to delete it because we're not going to use this one. So first of all, delete this file and try to new files. For example, the flu Java is a domain, like an entity class. So we're going to add just 2 attributes like a field, like a ID and name. And also we're going to create 2 constructor here. The first of all, with just 1 parameter like a name. When you create a fluid entity with the post method, we're going to use this one. And the other constructor at the full all the parameter like ID and name, which is mapped to create a new entity. And here's the interesting part to use Neo4j. Actually, in order to have the statement result, you can return a node of graph based on the Neo4j node object. So that's why we're going to define the fluid method here. Return from node is from your Neo4j ID and your name from that. All right, the domain entity just defined. The next thing is we're going to create the simple resource Java Bean to CRUD capability. In this case, we're going to just specify the endpoint for RESTful API and return such as the JSON format because we already edited the REST Jackson extension here. All right. First of all, we're going to inject the Neo4j driver to use Neo4j database in this Quarkus application. So let's try to define the simple retrieve database with the get method here. Let's say the method name is get. We return the completion stage with the response. And first of all, we're going to open new asynchronous session with the Neo4j database. And then we're going to try to add a new cycle statement using the run as a sync method here. So you can define the cycle statement like a match the fruit, the entity name, and return all the table data. You can actually edit more condition like order or some other stuff like a SQL query, something like that. Now, once you execute the query with the cipher statement, we're going to retrieve the cursor to list all result from the fruit entity. And then we're going to close the session after we finish executing this cipher statement. So edit the session, close async. And then the last step, so we needed to create the JSRS response to return the JSON format because we're gonna actually access this method use the RESTful API. So this is the response builder. It's a build. That's it. Okay, it looks good. So when you access the endpoint, because we already running Quarkus demo, it's automatically compile, redeploy, and there's nothing in there because this is the empty database at this moment. You can actually access to HTTP tool as well. So let's try to add a new method to create the nodes like an entity here. The pause method and the same response return the completion stage. Now let's say the method name like a create and a return with the parameter the fruit and the Java class. We also need to open new asynchronous session and then create new cipher statement with some named parameter such as the fruit name like a banana, apple, something like that. So in order to we're gonna map the values from parameter when you invoke this method using a card command or from REST API from the other application or like a HTTP from client perspective. So once you edit a new create cipher statement, we're gonna close that session. So also we're gonna need to apply the fruit, the entity. We're gonna get that fruit entity from the Neo4j record. And the last thing is we're gonna apply the consistent float which allows you close a synchronized session. And then last thing is that we're gonna response this result with the XRS response, just like a with it in the get method just earlier. This is the just simple definition how to develop a get method and a create method to store new data into your Neo4j database. Okay, let's try to call the create method using HTTP py. So I'm gonna try to add like an apple, a new fruit as entity, and then you just create a new one, and the 211 response code, and then try to several times with a different fruit name like a banana, and then let's say try to create a new like a mango. Yeah, that's it. And then try to access the endpoint. Once again, you got a three the fluid, just create a Neo4j. Okay, this is a really good simple example how to create your CRUD capability with the database, specifically Neo4j using Quarkus Dev Services. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna try to deploy this application, but actually not gonna deploy, but try to package this application, and which means that we're not gonna use the dev service any longer, which means that we need to specify the production environment. So let's say we're gonna to add the prod prefix configuration on application properties such as password. We already saw the default configuration in dev UI. Just copy from the configuration name here, keys, and then same the product prefix and then the password and secret, a username, Neo4j. You can actually define whatever you need. And then the last thing is Quarkus Neo4j URI. This is actual access endpoint to Neo4j database with both protocol. So this is the default when I run dev services, but we're going to change that a little bit different. Like let's say, even though this is a local host, but let's say this is a production environment of 7687 deport. Okay, I just save the file and start the dev mode. Let's try to package this application. Just imagine that we're gonna package the application and deploy that, and but we're not gonna deploy actually, but just run the jar file just like a production profile. Okay, I'm just packaging this application and skip the unit test, and then try to use the Java command line to running that. In order to that, let's try to run the extra container for Neo4j. Here's the interesting part. We're gonna explore the publish port 7687 we just defined in the application, the bold URL. So Neo4j just stand up and then back to another terminal and then just run the Quarkus application. And the interesting part here, so there are the remote interface like a graphical GUI, the 7470 URL. You can actually retrieve all data based on GUI. So try to run the Quarkus application using Java command line. Under the target gateway, there are the fast jar application. Once your Quarkus is running, you can find the profile, production profile activated, which means Quarkus picked up your product configuration. Okay, here's the Neo4j web browser console. You can try to access the username and password we actually define on your Quarkus application. Same, the Neo4j and secret, and the same, the connected URL. This is the browser URL, and then try to access the cipher statement, just copy from an application, and then paste that and execute it. And there's nothing in there, no nodes, no record here. So try to create just a few entity here, like try to create an orange, and then try to another the fruit like a pineapple, and one of my favorite fruit. And then let's try to add some more, such as a banana, and then why don't you try to add like an apple as a new entity here. So, okay, I think so we just created 4 new fruit, and I try to rerun that cipher statement, and then now you can have 4 different records as known here. So it's a really graphical way to visualize your data storage. You can actually have a table and text and a codes as well. Pretty easy to understand the relation between data, but also you can find actual data as well. This is one of the common database for define your data relationship with the Neo4j. So one of the good thing is Quarkus provide the dev services for developer to stand up Neo4j on your local machine to develop the local application with the database transaction. You can also use a reactive application with the Neo4j with the dev services. When you have Quarkus Muni extension, you can actually use reactive programming like return Muni or Uni from Neo4j database. Thank you for watching. Have a good rest of the day.